The goal is not to keep sugar out of our system, natural sugars. The goal is to be able to allow our system to use the sugars properly. I hear that sometimes that people feel like, well, I can't eat any sugar. I should go on the carnivore diet or the keto diet if I have diabetes, because that'll keep sugar out of my system and then I won't have any sugar spikes. But what you're saying is that's not the right way to look at it. Let's let your body work properly instead of giving it a band-aid. Talk to me more about these different, the carnivore, the keto, the things that people are so focused on, like, oh no, I can't, like you said, I can't eat fruit, I can't eat grains because I'm diabetic. But no, that's the wrong way to go about it, right?
I would love to answer that question because at least once a week I go on rants against keto on social media. So here's the thing. You get diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. The first thing that comes to your mind is, I have to avoid carbohydrates. You Google, what do I eat? And the first thing that pops up is ketogenic diet. And if you want to go the extreme, like the carnivore diet, right? Which are low carbohydrate, high fat, high protein diets in the case of carnivore, or just high fat, low carb in the case of a keto diet. Now, the problem with those diets is that they are not truly making you insulin sensitive, which means that when somebody's on a ketogenic diet, they cannot eat a banana without a gigantic glucose spike. They are still insulin resistant at a physiological level. Now, I'm not even going to get into the long-term complications of eating high amounts of meat, high amounts of saturated fat. That is when we get into the cardiovascular problems and so on. But just when focusing on blood glucose responses, when you are trying to reverse type 2 diabetes, you should focus on being insulin sensitive in a glucose challenged state, which means that if you are not able to process carbohydrates correctly on a glucose challenged state, then you have not reversed this condition. And that is something that a ketogenic diet doesn't allow you to do. But unfortunately, people still go into it. And then 3 months down the line, they go to the doctor and their A1C is down, their fasting blood glucose is down. And on paper, clearly they don't have type 2 diabetes. So the doctor is like, continue doing what you're doing. I don't care what it is. You are doing great. They go back home. They're like, I have reversed my type 2 diabetes. Let me go ahead and eat a pint of ice cream and a banana or something. They do that and their blood glucose skyrockets. That tells them that they have not reversed the root cause of this condition. And that is unfortunate when you can go the opposite side, high carbohydrate, the good kind, low saturated fat, low fat as a whole, which is the plant-based whole food diet, basically. Enjoy carbohydrates again, be tolerant to these carbohydrates again, and just see normal rises in your blood glucose, like Diana mentioned, instead of seeing gigantic spikes.
Yeah. And just to add to that too, I think a lot of people are so focused on the immediate responses in their blood sugar. So, of course, eating low carb and carnivore, you're not going to see those blood sugar spikes, right? When you cut out all those carbohydrates, they're a little too focused on that, on the immediate result, and aren't looking at the bigger picture of what happens if you eat this way long term, or if you were to switch your diet over to more of a whole food plant-based diet. What are the implications? What are the results long term? And that's what I think people need to start shifting their focus. Stop focusing on that short-term blood sugar response and see what is going to happen long term. And when you look at the research shows both sides. It shows when you eat a diet that's high in red meat, red processed meats, it increases your risk of type 2 diabetes. And when you eat a diet that's more focused on whole foods, plant-based foods, it actually decreases your risk. Not only decreases your risk, but it helps decrease complications associated with type 2 diabetes. It helps you manage type 2 diabetes more. It helps you decrease your blood sugar long term, your A1C long term. And there was actually just a study that came out. I think we did a rant on this as well. It was researchers from Harvard School of Public Health, and they actually looked at a pretty big cohort, and they found that people who ate more servings of red meat, including processed and unprocessed, had a much greater risk of type 2 diabetes. And it started with just an extra 2 servings of meat a week compared to those who ate fewer. And then they also found the opposite was true, that when these people replaced a serving of red meat with a plant-based protein like a legume or even a nut, their risk decreased significantly.
Now, is this because you mentioned earlier that the fat droplets in the muscles are unable to accept, hear insulin's knocking on the door to let the glucose in? Is that why meat is not good for you? And is it tell me what's going on? Because a lot of people, keto, I hear, at least in the beginning, they will lose weight. And I also heard you say that if you lose body fat, that makes you more insulin sensitive. What's going on that the protein you recommend is plant-based and not animal?
Now, what we know is that they definitely are higher in saturated fat. If you look at a ribeye and you compare it to 2 cups of beans, the saturated fat on both are going to be astronomically different. So what we know is that saturated fat is increasing your levels of insulin resistance. And it's not just a saturated fat, unfortunately. I have to be clear and honest about this. It's the combination of saturated fat and refined carbohydrates that develop this insulin resistance. And most people are not just eating a ribeye and that's it. Like, you're pairing it up with potatoes. You're pairing it up with mashed potatoes that are high in butter. With the rest of your diet that could also include some cereals and refined carbohydrates and so on. So you have to look at the entirety of your diet. You cannot just look at, okay, red meat gives us type 2 diabetes. It's truly the whole dietary pattern. So on a whole food plant-based diet, you're reducing your saturated fat immediately. You are reducing your overall fat content immediately, and you're completely void of refined carbohydrates. And that in turn allows you to consume less calories and more nutrients per bite of food that you take. And that also leads to the weight loss that people see on a plant-based diet and so on. Can people lose weight on a carnivore diet? Absolutely. And are they improving their health by losing weight? Absolutely. Okay. Like, there's no denying that. But you also have to look at what are they exchanging in exchange of weight loss? What else? What are they putting at risk for increasing the consumption of red meat? So again, it's not black or white. There's so much gray area on here, and it's all about your dietary pattern as a whole. We cannot blame just one food for the development of type 2 diabetes.
A lot of the times people see weight loss when they switch their dietary pattern, because some of the main contributors of excess calories in the diet are going to be refined carbohydrates, fat, processed foods. And when you're switching your dietary pattern to whether that's a plant-based diet or a low carb diet, you're usually taking something away. So when you switch over to a keto or low carb, you're removing all carbs, but you are removing refined carbohydrates, which is contributing a ton of calories. So just by changing your dietary pattern, and by eliminating one of those food groups that causes excess calories, you are probably going to see some weight loss. And like Jose said, weight loss is going to result in, it's going to help reverse some insulin resistance. So yes, that is a really great benefit. I think it's 7, even just reducing your body weight 5 to 10% can have so many great positive outcomes. And so if you are someone who finds that low carb works better for you and you're able to maintain that in the long term, we're not going to tell you not to do that, right? Like, if you can lose weight and maintain that kind of a dietary pattern, okay, good for you, and you can stick with it. But it's not something that we're going to recommend, because even the American Diabetes Association says that low carb diets really aren't sustainable in the long run. And for you to be successful with reversing insulin resistance, you want to be able to have a healthy body weight long term. So that's why we don't recommend those low carb diets, because again, they're just hard to maintain.
I want to clarify, Jose, you said potato. You said, well, the person eating the meat is also eating a potato. But potatoes are okay, right?
They are totally okay. Yes. I mean, they're a whole food. They are plant-based. They check all the boxes for our method. Absolutely.